The aliens were coming. Huge ships filled the sky, blocking the sun. They were from a powerful race, one that had conquered many worlds. They had advanced weapons, technology far beyond anything humans had. They were sure that Earth would be easy to take. But when they saw the humans, they couldn't believe their eyes. A small army stood ready to defend Earth. The human soldiers were not large in number. They were scattered in small groups across the world, but they were determined. They looked like a joke to the aliens. The aliens laughed loudly. "Is this what they send to stop us?" One alien commander sneered. The humans' weapons were small and old-fashioned. They had no shields, no advanced ships. They only had their guns, tanks, and planes. They didn't even have the numbers to match the alien force. To the aliens, it was like bringing a knife to a gunfight. It was laughable. The alien fleet was massive. Hundreds of ships filled the sky, and they had more on the way. They had soldiers ready to land, weapons that could destroy entire cities with a single blast. They were confident they would win. As the humans prepared to defend their land, the alien commanders looked at their displays. They couldn't help but laugh again. "These humans think they can stop us," an alien general said, shaking his head. "We will crush them in no time. They won't even know what hit them." The humans, on the other hand, stood tall. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and underprepared, but they had something the aliens did not: determination. They knew the enemy was strong, but they also knew they were fighting for their homes, their families, and their planet. This was their world, and they would not let it fall without a fight. One human soldier looked up at the sky, watching as the alien ships loomed overhead. He knew the battle would be hard, but he wasn't afraid. He had trained for this moment, even though he had never imagined facing an army like this. The human army was small, but they were all prepared to give their all. They were ready to fight, even if it meant giving everything to protect Earth. The aliens continued their mockery. They saw the humans setting up defenses. The soldiers were placing barriers, setting up old, rusted tanks, and manning their positions. It all looked so weak to the aliens. They had seen much larger armies, much stronger forces. The humans' weapons seemed tiny and outdated. Their machines looked like toys next to the powerful alien technology. But the human soldiers did not care about the aliens' laughter. They had a purpose. They were willing to die for their planet. The aliens might have laughed now, but they would soon learn that human strength was not measured in the size of an army or the power of weapons. It was measured in the hearts of those who fought. The alien commanders ordered their ships to move closer. They were ready to land. They were ready to take Earth. "Prepare to land, my warriors," the alien leader said. "These humans are not a threat. We will take their planet with ease." As the first wave of alien soldiers began to land, they couldn't stop laughing. They watched as the humans positioned their old tanks and set up makeshift defenses. The aliens thought it was adorable, almost like children pretending to play war. They didn't know what they were up against. The humans, meanwhile, had no idea what the aliens had planned. They were nervous, yes, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. The human commanders gave orders, their voices strong. Every soldier knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for their future, for their homes, and for everything they loved. They were determined to show the aliens that they were wrong. And so, the aliens laughed. They laughed because they thought it would be easy. They laughed because they didn't understand. They didn't understand that the human spirit, the will to fight, was a force unlike any other. They didn't know that even a small army could stand strong when it was fighting for something it loved. The alien forces were ready. The human forces were ready. But there was one thing the aliens didn't know: the humans would never give up. No matter how small, no matter how weak they seemed, the humans would fight with everything they had. And soon, the aliens would stop laughing. The alien ships filled the sky. They were huge, and there were so many of them. The people on Earth could see them clearly now. The world was silent. People stopped what they were doing and stared up, some in fear, some in disbelief. But they knew the time had come. The invasion had started. The humans didn't have the advanced technology the aliens had. They didn't have spaceships that could travel across galaxies or weapons that could destroy cities with a single shot. But they had something just as powerful: determination. The soldiers on the ground knew they were fighting for their homes, their families, and their future. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight to keep their world alive. In every country, humans began to prepare. Across the world, armies gathered in the open fields, on the streets, and inside bases. The soldiers lined up, ready for what was to come. They wore old, dusty uniforms, and many of them held guns and equipment that seemed small and weak compared to the aliens' advanced technology. But none of this mattered. What mattered was the fire in their hearts. The human soldiers had no time to waste. They rushed to their positions, setting up makeshift defenses. Tanks, old and rusty, were driven to key positions. They had been used in battles long before, but now they were ready for one more fight. Some soldiers carried rifles and shotguns, while others were armed with whatever they could find. Every man and woman knew that they had to make do with what they had. It was their only chance. In the command center, the leaders of the human forces gathered. They were nervous, yes, but their eyes were focused. They knew the battle would be tough, but they had a plan. It was not a plan to win with sheer force. It was a plan to use their intelligence, their knowledge of the land, and their teamwork. The humans might not be as powerful as the aliens, but they were smart. They could use their weaknesses against them. "Listen up," the commander said, his voice steady. "We may not have much, but we have each other. And that's all we need. We're not going to let them take our homes. We'll fight until we can't anymore." Across the globe, people were listening. The soldiers stood tall, ready to face the unknown. They knew they might not win, but they were ready to give everything. Their families, their cities, their countries, everything depended on them. Back on the front lines, soldiers dug trenches and set up barriers. They knew the aliens would land soon, and they needed to be ready. Every person had a job. Some soldiers worked with the engineers, making traps to slow down the alien forces. Others set up makeshift barriers from old cars and metal scraps. They didn't have the latest tech, but they were creative. And when they worked together, they could make anything work. Every soldier knew their role. The tanks would hold off the aliens as long as they could, but they knew they wouldn't last forever. The human army didn't expect to win with strength alone. Their plan was simple: survive long enough to make the aliens see that they couldn't take Earth so easily. They had to show the invaders that humans were not weak. They had to make them understand that the human spirit was far stronger than any weapon. The alien ships hovered above, their engines rumbling as they prepared to land. The humans could hear the sound, and it made their hearts race. But they didn't back down. They didn't run. They stayed in their positions, ready to fight. The soldiers didn't know how the battle would end, but they knew one thing: they would not let Earth fall without a fight. "Stay calm," a soldier whispered to his teammate. "We're doing this for Earth, for everyone we love." And they were. The soldiers didn't fight for glory or fame. They fought because it was the only choice they had. It was their world, and they weren't going to let it be taken without giving everything they had. The alien ships began to move lower, closer to the ground. The humans could see the landing gear coming down, the massive alien soldiers beginning to unload. It was happening. The fight was about to begin. The humans knew that this was their last chance. If they failed here, Earth would be lost. The battle had begun, but the humans didn't flinch. They stood strong, even though they were small compared to the invaders. The aliens had no idea what they were about to face. The sound of the ships landing grew louder, but the humans held their ground. They had prepared as best they could. Now it was time to see if their courage was enough. The tiny army of humans stood ready, and they would fight with everything they had. The moment had arrived. The alien ships had landed. Huge, dark shadows covered the land as their massive ships touched down. The human soldiers watched from their positions, hearts pounding in their chests. They had prepared for this, but nothing could fully prepare them for the sight of the alien invaders. The soldiers could see the aliens clearly now. They were tall, with strange, armored bodies and weapons that looked much stronger than anything the humans had. The aliens began to march forward, their footsteps shaking the ground. Their weapons glowed with an eerie light. The humans were ready, but they could feel the weight of the situation. They were vastly outnumbered. The aliens had advanced technology, ships, lasers, shields, that the humans could never match. The battle seemed impossible, but the humans weren't afraid. They had no choice but to fight. They stood tall and held their ground. They had only one chance to survive, and they weren't going to waste it. As the aliens marched closer, the human commanders gave the signal. The first shot came from the humans. It was a single rifle shot fired by a young soldier who had never fought in a battle before. The bullet bounced off the alien's armor. The soldier's heart raced. He had hoped that his shot would make some difference, but it was nothing. The alien didn't even flinch. But the human army didn't stop. They kept firing. Tanks roared to life, launching shells at the alien soldiers. The explosions were loud, filling the air with smoke and dust. But still, the aliens moved forward. Their shields stopped most of the human attacks, and their advanced armor protected them from the bullets. The humans were getting desperate. They knew they couldn't keep this up for long. Then something unexpected happened. One of the alien soldiers fell. The humans could hardly believe it. At first, no one knew what had happened. But then, they saw it. A human soldier, using a simple grenade launcher, had hit the alien in the right spot, on its weak point. The explosion sent the alien flying backward, and it collapsed to the ground. The other aliens stopped for a moment, looking at their fallen comrade. The human soldiers saw this and took the chance. They fired again, more focused now. Another alien fell, and then another. The aliens were surprised. They hadn't expected the humans to be able to hurt them. They had underestimated the humans. The human soldiers didn't wait for the aliens to recover. They kept firing, using their knowledge of the land to their advantage. The tanks shot at the aliens from behind hills, where the aliens couldn't see them. The soldiers in the trenches shot from hidden positions, where they were harder to target. They didn't have the power of the alien weapons, but they had the advantage of the land. As more aliens fell, the human soldiers felt a spark of hope. The battle wasn't over, but it was clear that the humans were not going to be easy to defeat. The aliens had thought it would be a simple victory. They had laughed at the human army, calling them weak and small. But now, they were starting to realize that the humans had something more than just guns and tanks. They had heart, and that heart was stronger than any alien armor. The aliens began to panic. Some of them tried to retreat, but they were trapped. The human soldiers had prepared for this. They had set up barriers, dug trenches, and placed mines. The aliens had no choice but to fight on, even though they didn't want to. They hadn't expected the humans to be so strong. They hadn't expected this kind of resistance. The human commanders saw the change in the aliens' behavior. They were no longer laughing. They were no longer so sure of their victory. The humans were winning small victories, one at a time. The aliens were beginning to lose their confidence, and that was exactly what the humans needed. It wasn't a complete victory yet. The aliens still had powerful weapons, and many of them were still coming. But the humans were doing the impossible. They were standing their ground. They had shown the aliens that they could fight back, that they could hurt them, and that had changed everything. The human soldiers didn't stop. They kept fighting, pushing the aliens back inch by inch. They knew it was just the beginning, but they had shown that even a small army could surprise the strongest force in the galaxy. The aliens hadn't expected this, But now they were starting to understand. The humans were not to be underestimated. The battle wasn't won yet, but the humans had made their mark. And that was all that mattered. The aliens had learned a valuable lesson. They had laughed at the humans before, but now they would see just how strong the human spirit really was. The battle was far from over. The alien forces were strong, but the human soldiers had learned something important. They had discovered that the aliens were not invincible. They had weaknesses, and the humans had to use their brains to find them. The aliens had powerful shields that blocked most attacks. Their armor was almost impossible to break. The human soldiers knew they couldn't win by using brute force alone. They needed to outsmart the aliens. They needed to use the land, the environment, and their creativity to their advantage. One human commander, Captain Maria, stood in front of her troops, her eyes focused. She knew they didn't have enough weapons or soldiers to win with strength. But they had something better: their intelligence. Humans were good at thinking on their feet. They could adapt, change their plans, and come up with new ideas when things didn't go as planned. "Listen up," Captain Maria shouted to her team. "We're not going to beat them by fighting head-on. We have to be smart. We'll use what we have: traps, the land, and surprise." The soldiers listened carefully, their faces serious. They didn't have much, but they were ready to fight. The aliens had underestimated them before, but now the humans had a plan. The first thing the humans did was use the terrain to their advantage. The aliens were used to fighting on flat, open ground, but the humans knew their land. They knew where the hills, forests, and valleys were. The human soldiers dug deep trenches, hiding themselves and their tanks out of sight. They set up hidden explosives in the trees and under the ground. The aliens couldn't see them, and the humans waited, quiet and still. The aliens, on the other hand, marched forward, thinking they could win easily. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The first trap was set when a group of alien soldiers walked into a valley. They thought it was safe, but as soon as they reached the middle, the ground beneath them exploded. The humans had hidden explosives there, and when they went off, the blast sent several aliens flying. The aliens were shocked. They hadn't expected this. They looked around, trying to find out where the attack had come from, but the humans were hidden, using the land to remain out of sight. Captain Maria's plan was working. The aliens were confused, and the humans were picking them off one by one. As the aliens tried to regroup, the human soldiers launched another surprise. They had placed decoys, old, broken-down tanks that looked like real ones from a distance. The aliens thought they were real and focused their attacks on them. But when they fired, the tanks didn't explode. Instead, they triggered a second trap, more explosives, hidden under the ground. The blast took out several alien soldiers and left the invaders stunned. The aliens started to panic. They had expected a quick victory, but the humans were proving to be much more difficult than they had imagined. The aliens tried to fight back, using their powerful weapons and advanced technology, but it was clear that they weren't used to being outsmarted. The humans were using their brains, and it was starting to make a difference. Captain Maria watched as her soldiers continued to work together. They were clever, using everything they had: old weapons, clever tactics, and even the land itself, to keep the aliens on the defensive. She had expected the humans to be underestimated, but now the aliens were the ones who were under pressure. "Keep it up," Captain Maria said, her voice calm but strong. "We're not just fighting for survival. We're showing them that humans are not to be taken lightly." The human soldiers nodded, their faces set in determination. They knew that every move they made was important. The aliens might have stronger weapons, but the humans had the power of teamwork and creativity. As long as they worked together and used their brains, they could keep turning the tide in their favor. Meanwhile, the aliens were beginning to make mistakes. They were so focused on trying to find and destroy the humans that they had become careless. The humans used this to their advantage, setting up more traps, drawing the aliens into false positions, and launching quick, surprise attacks when the aliens weren't expecting it. The human soldiers didn't stop. They continued to use every trick they could think of, from setting up fake signals to confuse the aliens to using smoke screens to hide their movements. The aliens were slow to adapt, and the humans were quickly gaining the upper hand. Even though the battle wasn't over, the human soldiers could feel something changing. The aliens were losing their confidence. They were beginning to realize that the humans weren't just fighting with weapons, they were fighting with their minds, and that made them far more dangerous. As the sun began to set, the humans had made it clear to the aliens that they were not going down without a fight. The aliens had expected an easy win. Instead, they were facing the full power of human intelligence and creativity. Captain Maria smiled as she watched her soldiers work. They had done it. They had taken the fight to the aliens in a way the invaders had never imagined. The aliens might still have the numbers and the power, but the humans had something they couldn't beat: their brains. And that made all the difference. The battle was getting harder. The human soldiers had fought bravely, using every trick they knew. But the aliens weren't giving up. They had powerful weapons and armor that the humans could barely scratch. It seemed like the humans were losing. But there was something the aliens didn't know, something they had not yet seen. The humans had a secret strength. It wasn't something they could measure with weapons or technology. It wasn't something that could be seen on the battlefield at first glance, but it was there, hidden deep inside every soldier. It was their will, their determination, and their unbreakable spirit. Captain Maria watched as her soldiers worked. They were tired, some of them wounded, but they were still fighting. Every time the aliens attacked, the humans pushed back. It was clear to her now, this was the humans' true strength. They never gave up. No matter how hard it got, no matter how powerful the enemy seemed, the humans would keep going. "Don't stop," Captain Maria called to her soldiers. "We're not done yet. Keep fighting." She could see that the soldiers were getting tired. They were running low on ammo, and the alien forces were not letting up. But Maria knew something important. The aliens had underestimated human resilience. They thought they could break the humans with force, but they didn't understand the heart of humanity. The humans had never given up on their home. They had fought wars before, against each other and against nature. They had survived disasters, sickness, and hardship. Every time the world seemed to be falling apart, humans had found a way to rebuild. That was their strength. The aliens had advanced weapons, but they didn't have this. They didn't have the will to keep going when all seemed lost, and that's why they were starting to lose. The battle continued as the aliens pushed forward, but now something was different. The humans were fighting back harder. They didn't just use weapons. They used their minds, their resourcefulness, and their teamwork. They worked together like a single unit, covering each other, helping each other, and never backing down. In one part of the battlefield, a group of soldiers had set up a trap. They had gathered all their remaining explosives and hid them under piles of old vehicles. The aliens were advancing, thinking they had the humans cornered. But the humans had set the perfect trap. When the aliens got close enough, they triggered the explosives, sending a massive shockwave through the alien ranks. The aliens were thrown back, stunned by the sudden attack. For a moment, the battlefield was silent. The human soldiers took the chance to regroup, moving quickly to safe positions. They didn't need to wait for orders. They were already working together, thinking as one. Captain Maria saw this and felt a spark of hope. She knew the aliens were strong, but she also knew that their strength didn't come from the things they carried or the ships they flew. It came from their belief in their mission. And the humans had that same belief. The human soldiers weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for something far deeper. They were fighting for their homes, for their families, and for their way of life. The aliens might have come to conquer Earth, but they didn't understand what it meant to be human. In another part of the battlefield, a small group of soldiers was surrounded. The aliens had cornered them, their weapons aimed at the humans, ready to fire. The humans didn't give up. They fought with everything they had, even though they were outnumbered. And in that moment, something amazing happened. The rest of the human soldiers rushed in, covering their comrades. They came from every direction, some running, others driving old vehicles, but they all came together. The aliens were confused. They hadn't expected this. The humans had no reason to keep fighting when things seemed hopeless, but they did. They rushed in with everything they had, showing the aliens that they would never stop. The battle had been long. The humans were tired, their weapons running low, and their soldiers hurt. But something had changed. Something big was happening. The aliens had thought they were going to win. They thought the humans would break. But now, the situation was shifting. Slowly, but surely, the balance was tipping in favor of the humans. The aliens had underestimated the human spirit. They had come to Earth with advanced weapons, powerful technology, and endless numbers. They had expected an easy victory, but instead, they had met resistance unlike anything they had faced before. The humans fought not just with their weapons, but with their hearts and minds. And that made all the difference. Captain Maria stood on a small hill, looking out over the battlefield. The smoke from the explosions hung in the air, and the sounds of gunfire and shouts filled the surroundings. But Maria felt something different now. It wasn't fear or exhaustion. It was hope. A deep, burning hope that the humans could win this battle. She turned to her second-in-command, Lieutenant Harris, who stood next to her. His face was covered in dirt and sweat, but his eyes were clear and focused. "We're winning, aren't we?" Maria asked, her voice low. Harris didn't answer right away. He watched the battlefield for a moment before nodding. "It's happening," he said. "The aliens, they're starting to fall back." Maria's heart raced. It was hard to believe, but she could see it now. The aliens, once so confident, were retreating. Their ships were lifting off the ground, trying to escape the human soldiers who were pushing forward. The human forces had been relentless. They hadn't given up. And now the aliens were starting to feel the pressure. They were realizing that this wasn't going to be an easy victory. The aliens had lost their confidence. They had been so sure of themselves when they first landed on Earth. But now, their leaders were calling for a retreat. They couldn't handle the humans' unexpected tactics, their bravery, and the power of their teamwork. The aliens had expected to crush the human resistance in a matter of hours, but instead, they had been fighting for days, losing soldiers and running low on supplies. As the aliens pulled back, the human soldiers cheered. But they didn't let their guard down. The battle wasn't over. The aliens might be retreating, but they could easily regroup and come back stronger. The humans had to be ready for anything. Captain Maria quickly gathered her commanders. They huddled together, planning their next move. They couldn't let the aliens escape without finishing the job. "We have to push now," Maria said firmly. "We can't let them regroup. This is our chance. We've already proven that we can stand up to them. Now we need to end this once and for all." The commanders nodded. They had been through so much together. They had fought for days, and their spirits were high now. They knew that the tide had turned, but they also knew they had to be careful. The aliens were dangerous, and they wouldn't leave without a fight. The human forces moved quickly, using all the knowledge they had gained during the battle. They knew the aliens were trying to pull back to their ships, so the humans set up blockades along the paths the aliens were likely to take. Tanks, soldiers, and hidden explosives lined the way. The humans had learned how to fight smarter, not just harder. The alien forces hesitated. They were used to seeing their enemies fall back when faced with such overwhelming force. But the humans didn't retreat. They didn't show fear. The aliens began to wonder if they had made a mistake. They had underestimated the power of human resolve. They had thought the humans would break, but the humans had something the aliens didn't: the power of belief, the power of fighting for what mattered most. In the midst of the chaos, a voice rang out from the human side. "Don't stop. We're stronger than this." The words were simple, but they carried power. It wasn't just a call to keep fighting. It was a reminder that the humans had something inside them that no alien technology could touch. It was their hearts, their courage, and their unshakable belief in themselves. And that belief was their secret strength. The aliens, now realizing they weren't fighting just an army, they were fighting an entire species united by something more powerful than weapons, began to falter. The human spirit was stronger than they had imagined. The fight was not over, but now, the humans were gaining the upper hand. And the aliens could feel it. For the first time since the battle began, the aliens hesitated. They saw the determination in the eyes of the human soldiers. The humans might have been small, but they had the biggest strength of all, the will to never give up. And that strength was about to change everything. As the alien forces tried to retreat, they were met with resistance. Human soldiers emerged from behind rocks, hills, and trees, firing at the aliens as they moved. The alien ships, once so confident in their power, now seemed vulnerable. The humans attacked from all angles, pushing the aliens back further and further. The aliens had no choice but to fight harder, but their confidence had shattered. Captain Maria stood at the front of the line, leading her troops into the heart of the battle. Her soldiers followed her without hesitation. They had seen what was possible. They had seen that the aliens could be beaten. And now, they weren't holding anything back. For the first time in the battle, the aliens were beginning to panic. They had expected to be the victors, but now, they were struggling to maintain their hold. Their ships tried to launch, but the humans had set up obstacles, cutting off their escape routes. The human soldiers pushed forward, not giving the aliens any space to breathe. Maria could feel the shift in the air. The battle was no longer just about weapons or strategy. It was about something deeper. The humans had found a new strength. They had realized that they weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their future, for their home, and for each other. And that made them stronger than the aliens could ever have imagined. The human forces continued to advance. The aliens were being pushed back into their ships, and their retreat was turning into a rout. The humans weren't just defending their land. They were taking back what the aliens had tried to steal. The alien invaders had underestimated the strength of the human spirit. And now, they were paying the price. The big shift had happened. The aliens had thought they were in control. But now, the humans were in charge. It was clear that the tide had turned. And this time, there was no turning back. The battle was finally coming to an end. After days of fierce fighting, after endless hours of resistance, the human soldiers were seeing the results of their hard work. The alien forces, once so powerful, were now in full retreat. Their ships were flying away, trying to escape, while their soldiers scattered, trying to find safety. The humans had won. Captain Maria stood at the front, watching as the aliens pulled back. Her heart was pounding, but it wasn't from fear. It was from a feeling she had never experienced before. It was the feeling of victory. For so long, the humans had been on the defensive. The aliens had come with their advanced weapons, their ships, their armor. They had laughed at the humans, thinking they could crush them easily. But the humans had proven them wrong. They had used their intelligence, their creativity, and their sheer will to fight back. And now, the aliens were retreating. Maria looked around at her soldiers. They were tired, dirty, and wounded, but their faces were filled with pride. They had done it. They had fought for their families, for their homes, and for their future. And they had won. The humans had shown the aliens that they were not to be underestimated. They were stronger than the invaders had ever imagined. The soldiers cheered, their voices loud and full of joy. They hugged each other, laughed, and cried. It wasn't just a victory on the battlefield. It was a victory for humanity, a victory for everything they held dear. But Captain Maria knew that even though the battle was over, the war was not yet won. There were still alien ships retreating, still soldiers on the ground trying to escape. The humans couldn't stop now. They had to finish what they started. "Let's go," Maria shouted. "We're not done yet. We need to push them all the way back." Her voice was filled with determination. The humans had fought this hard. They couldn't stop now. The soldiers quickly fell into line, ready for the final push. They moved forward, closing in on the remaining alien forces. The battle was almost over, but they weren't going to let a single enemy escape. The aliens, now realizing they were completely outmatched, tried to fight back, but it was clear they had lost. Their weapons were ineffective against the human soldiers. They were desperate, but they didn't have the strength or the numbers to continue. One by one, their ships were forced to retreat, and their soldiers were captured or defeated. As the humans pushed forward, they reached the main command ship of the aliens. It was enormous, dark, and intimidating. But the humans didn't hesitate. They had come too far to be afraid now. They worked together, using everything they had learned during the battle to disable the alien ship's defenses. Soon, the command ship was surrounded, and the aliens inside knew there was nowhere to run. Captain Maria and her team were the first to board the ship. They moved carefully, staying alert as they searched for the alien leaders. They found them quickly, alien commanders who had once believed they could control Earth. Now, they were on their knees, surrounded by human soldiers. Maria looked down at them. They were powerful, but now they were nothing. The humans had beaten them, not just with weapons, but with their determination and unity. "We did it," Maria said softly, a smile spreading across her face. "We showed them that they can never conquer us." The alien leaders didn't answer. They knew they had lost. The humans had won, and their reign over Earth was over. The last of the alien ships were leaving the atmosphere, their once dominant fleet reduced to a few fleeing vessels. The humans had defended their planet. Earth was safe again. Back on the ground, the rest of the soldiers were celebrating. The humans had done the impossible. They had fought back against a stronger, more advanced enemy. And they had won. The aliens had laughed at the human soldiers at first, thinking they were weak. But now, those same soldiers stood tall, victorious. As the sun began to set over the battlefield, Captain Maria stood with her soldiers, watching the last of the alien ships disappear into the sky. It was a moment of peace, a moment of victory. "We may be small," Maria said, her voice carrying over the crowd, "but we have something the aliens will never understand. We fight for each other. We fight for what matters. And that is why we will always win." The soldiers cheered again, their spirits high. They had done the impossible. They had beaten the invaders. They had shown the universe that humans were not to be underestimated. The victory was theirs. As the humans looked up at the sky, they knew that this battle was just the beginning. The aliens might be gone, but they had learned an important lesson. Earth was no longer just a planet to conquer. It was a planet with a people who would fight to protect it, no matter the cost. And with that, the humans celebrated their hard-earned victory. They had defended their world, and in doing so, had proven that no force in the universe could ever break their spirit.